Dan Cohen from Uncaptured Media is a Jewish American journalist who has just been declared an anti Semite because he is anti Zionist. That comes from House Resolution 894, which just passed, that declares that anti Zionism is anti Semitism. That would also make most Hasidic Jews anti Semitic as well. So, Dan, thank you for joining us. I want to talk about a couple of things regarding the war in Israel. But first, this, because I'm sure this is not the first time you've been given the anti Semitic label, but is it the most official?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the hundreds of or maybe thousands of messages I've and comments I've gotten on Twitter, including death threats for being a self-hating Jew, are numerous. But this is officially it, according to the U.S. Congress. Myself and the largest Hasidic Jewish sect in the world are actually anti-Semites.
Okay. Do you think this is do you think it's a violation of the First Amendment, first of all? And do you think it just is a lack of understanding of anti-Zionist movement?
Um, a violation of the First Amendment? I mean, I don't know because there's nothing legally binding about it. It just, changes the definition of a word according to Congress, but it's not as if there's no teeth to it. I think it's going to be used to ramp up the sort of McCarthyite campaign going on in universities and in, the business world where, I mean, all of a sudden, you're have certain political opinions. You're supposed to be like pro diversity, pro LGBTQ, go through all these trainings, and then suddenly now they want you to express certain opinions, and then now certain opinions, if you're, if you criticize Israel's war on Gaza, then suddenly you're anti-Semitic and you're a racist. So I think it's going to be cracked down on students and the professional life and this kind of thing. I mean, I just look at it logically. If anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, then Zionism is Judaism. Now, Zionism actually was always historically rejected by Judaism. I mean, when Zionism first came around, it was denounced by Orthodox Jews, openly, by Reform Jews. I mean, there was the great Rebbe of the historical leader of the Satmar movement, which is in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. If you see Orthodox Jews there, Joel Teitelbaum, he said that Zionism, or the Holocaust, he believed, was actually punishment, was divine punishment for Zionism. And he believed that Zionists were actually responsible for the Holocaust. So, I mean, there's a wide range of thought among Jews on Zionism, but to say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism means that Zionism is Judaism. Now, if you think about it more, if Zionism is Judaism, then all Jews are loyal to the Zionist project, which is the state of Israel. And that reaffirms the idea that all Jews, myself, even though I'm secular and, I'm just a pretty regular American, or all of those Jews living in, New York and in Brooklyn, regardless of what their political ideology is, they are all loyal to the state of Israel, is what that actually means, which means they are fifth column. They are not loyal Americans. They don't belong in the United States or Canada or whatever European country, with any other country. They belong in Israel. So it is actually this resolution saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism is actually anti-Semitic itself. It is an affirmation of anti-Semitic thought about Jews in the world. And so it's really just classical European anti-Semitism reaffirmed in 2023 in the U.S. Congress. And it shows that even, in my opinion, even as 100 years ago, Jews were persecuted in this country. My grandfather, who's a secular guy, his name was Saul. He changed his name to Paul for business reasons, to have a Christian name. That's not the case anymore. So today, Jews are, of course, overrepresented in powerful positions, as is no secret to anyone. But even though Jews are basically in a golden age inside the United States, the powers that be, to some degree, still view Jews as a fifth element, as outsiders, and this is because of Zionism has given them this logic. So,
Right.
I mean, it's totally anti-Semitic.
Yeah, I liken it to saying all Black people must vote Democrat because they cannot have diversity of thought inside of that one group. And so we would never say that, or we should not say things like this. Now, you mentioned the Satmar Jews. I want to show this statement that they put about this resolution today, saying that Torah Jews want to live in peace with Muslims and Christians in the Holy Land. Therefore, being against Zionism is never anti-Semitism. And so, again, it seems like either House representatives that voted for this either don't care or they care more. This is my opinion. They care more about Israel and controlling thought that is anti-Israel than either of those things. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that Twitter account. We have to be careful about taking Twitter accounts. Anybody can make a Twitter account and get a blue check. And actually, Orthodox Jews refrain from using social media and all these kinds of things. So it's not necessarily like an official statement. However, there like the largest gathering, I think, of Orthodox Jews maybe in the world, a huge gathering of Satmar Jews just a few days ago in New York, where they repeated their denunciation of Zionism, their opposition to the state of Israel on theological grounds. I mean, it's purely theological for them. So there's no question about it. So I mean, when Congress says this, it's amazing that you have Gentiles, non-Jews, telling religious and all kinds of Jews what they believe and what they are allowed to believe, what they're not allowed to believe. And I mean, you mentioned the comparison between telling all Black people you have to vote for the Democratic Party. To me, it's even worse than that, because it's like, not you have to, that you belong to a foreign nation. Like all Black people, go back to Africa, go back, that's essentially what it's saying. But because, imagine if like Black people, had established some like settler, which, they had actually a settler nation in Africa, colonizing actual Africans, and then like, I don't know, white senators or the House was like, all Black people in the United States are actually loyal to that country. That's the level of insanity. It's basically a nice way of saying, get out of our country. You do not belong here. You're not American. That's why I say it's totally anti-Semitic.
Okay, let's talk about this part of the resolution that says, whereas the slogan "From the river to the sea" is a rallying cry for the eradication of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and has been used by anti-Israel protests in the United States and globally. Can you respond to this? Like, give us a little history of "From the river to the sea" and why they're saying now that this is extremist and should be punishable? Well, I'm saying they're
Well,
saying it should be punishable. They don't specifically said that, but I think this is a stepping stone. So go ahead.
yeah, well, they don't say what the phrase actually is. They say part of it. They say from the river to the sea, but they don't say Palestine will be free. That's the rest of it, which is what's commonly said at pro-Palestine rallies in the West. So they are inferring that call for freedom, is genocidal, which there's just no basis. That's totally a gigantic leap in logic that makes no sense whatsoever, and we're just supposed to accept that, when in fact what it really means, freedom for everyone living in Palestine. So you don't have a system where you have one people lording over another or afforded more rights than the other. It's just simply a call for freedom, as it sounds. Meanwhile, you have what they don't talk about is the charter of the Likud party, which is Benjamin Netanyahu's party that has ruled Israel most of the time since 1977. And the Likud party charter specifically states from the Mediterranean to the Jordan, so from the sea to the river, will always be under Israeli sovereignty. So how are we going to say that Palestinians or people who support Palestine saying from the river to the sea is genocidal and anti-Semitic? Meanwhile, the ruling party that is carrying out this horrible war on Gaza and has been occupying the West Bank and Gaza and ethnically cleansing it, building settlements for decades, even before the existence of the Likud, that's actively doing this is not genocidal, and we're not even, and they won't even address that. So the idea that it's all going to be under Israeli sovereignty forever, completely, you know, obvious what it means, that Palestinians at best will always live as, the underclass, will never be citizens. They will never be treated equal under Israeli sovereignty. And that's the reality of it. And that's honestly, it's much worse than that, what we're seeing in Gaza right now.
Okay, let's talk about the West Bank, because the United States today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced visa bans on Israel over settler violence in the West Bank. According to Al Jazeera, since October 7th, Israeli settlers have killed at least 9 Palestinians in the West Bank. That's 3 times as many as last year. And attacks on Palestinian villages and farmers have become commonplace. So first of all, can you explain what they mean by Israeli settlers, and why the heck would they care about a visa ban?
Well, yeah, so Israeli settlers are Israeli citizens living in legally occupied territory in the West Bank, which Israel's occupied since 1967, and then in 1974 began colonizing and building Jewish-only colonies strategically to prevent the establishment of any kind of Palestinian state, and that's gone on ever since. And that settlement enterprise has been sponsored by the Israeli government. It is a project of the Israeli government, and they will, like, if you say you're a young couple, you're a young Israeli couple, the government will subsidize your living in the West Bank to some degree. You can get money to go. It's like going and living in the suburbs that they want to expand or something. It's cheaper. That's like the cheapest place to live. So there are plenty of people who live in big settlements in the West Bank who are not necessarily the most like ideologically radical, people, but it's more for like convenience. And if you drive between, Israel and the West Bank, there's often no distinction. You can't tell when you enter the West Bank unless you're going into Palestinian areas, because there's then an Israeli military presence. But otherwise, you can't even really tell a lot of the time. So, but there is a segment of those settlers who are very ideologically fanatical and who will go actively attack Palestinians, go and burn olive trees and even kill farmers. And this year it's become much worse. And of course, after October 7th, they've become much more violent and aggressive. So these are truly fanatical people who are protected by the military, and they kill Palestinians and attack them and all kinds of terrible things and carry out pogroms. So when the United States, Blinken says, well, I'm going to restrict visas for them. Yeah, I mean, they don't really care. They're not coming to the United States, though. Actually, some of them do have ties to the United States. The Americans, U.S.-born Israeli settlers they're overrepresented. Americans are overrepresented among the Israeli settler population, and a lot of the most fanatical ones are actually Americans who went over there. But I think it's basically window dressing, because it's like sending aid into Gaza. Samantha Power is like in Egypt right now saying, oh, we're sending these trucks into Gaza, and it's like, meanwhile you're bombing, giving Israel all of the bombs and diplomatic cover to kill several hundred people every day. So it's really window dressing. But I mean, I think it also shows what the American approach to the whole thing is. The Israelis want to basically ethnically cleanse not only Gaza and push all of Palestinians in Gaza into the Sinai Desert, into Egypt. they also want to do that in the West Bank. That they want to take advantage of this opportunity under the cover of war to expel as many Palestinians as possible into Jordan is really where they want to send them. But because of geopolitical realities, Jordan is already basically a big holding cell for Palestinians. Something like 80% of Jordan's population are Palestinians who were expelled in 1948 and then 1967. So Israel's like, look, send the rest of them over there too. We want all of this land. And so the U.S.'s approach is no. Like, you don't understand the geopolitical realities that if we do that, that will destabilize Jordan. And having Jordan as kind of a holding cell for all of those Palestinians is important for the long-term stability of Israel. So, you can't get too crazy here. Just go kill a bunch of people in Gaza, do whatever you got to do, but, tone it down a little, I think is basically in the West Bank is essentially what the U.S. wants.
So then that's the contradiction here. It's not really about people, it's about politics, because they can't stand for only Palestinians in the West Bank and not for Gaza. But there is a political goal in saying one thing about only one side of the wall. I got it. Okay. Well, thank you for breaking this down for us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And you can find Dan and Uncaptured Media. Where would you like to direct people to follow you, Dan?
You can check out my site, my Uncaptured Substack. I'm publishing articles there frequently. My YouTube, my Rumble, Uncaptured Media. I'm very active on Twitter at DanCohen3000. So yeah, follow me there.
All right. Thanks again. Always a pleasure to see you.
Great to be back, Natali.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.